Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Deep Thoughts. And today we are talking about Vinland Saga, episode 16, History of Beasts. And so we finally reached a point that I feel was coming for a long time, and that's the group finally turning on Ashlad, because this is something that the show's been teasing for several episodes now. And this, I kind of figured after we lost Ragnar, the group would start to kind of be like, okay, so we lost this big leader, now we have Thorkel back on our tail again, and Ashlad just wants us to keep marching and marching and marching, and we're losing men left and right, and people are actually leaving the group at this point. This was coming. Like this has been a long time coming. But it does kind of bum me out that Atli, I think his name is, Atli and his brother Thorgrim, that they were also part of the people starting to be like, no, you know what, we're not feeling Ashlad anymore. And it's like, what? Those two, I'm nervous because now that I finally remembered their names and that they actually have characters, I don't want to lose them. It's definitely troubling to be an Ashlad fan these days because I do love Askeladd. I really do. I know he's a bad man, but at the same time, this whole show is filled with people who are quote-unquote bad men because there's no real good or bad guys. It's just sort of people trying to survive, and dang it, Ashlad is my boy. He's fascinating. I can't stop watching him. I get excited every time he's on screen. So to see Thorgrim and Atli start to doubt him, it's like, no. Like I said, I just got used to these guys. I love their dynamic with the priest, who is also fun in this episode. He's fun in the sense that he's doing his usual stick, but it's almost depressing now because there's no Ragnar to bounce off of. And I don't know, it's a troubling situation the group has found themselves in. Before we get more into Ashlad, who was absolutely on fire in this week's episode, I think it's important to talk a little bit about Prince Kanat, because his whole dynamic in the episode is genuinely pretty upsetting. Now, you guys know I haven't been the warmest towards Kanat. I've always thought that he was sort of like a wimp, but he would eventually grow to be strong. That's sort of the vibe that I had gotten from him. And that's still very much the same. I think he has a lot of room to grow. I do think that Ashlad's right in that he could grow to be a leader that these people would follow. It's just that right now he's not quite there yet. And with Ragnar, as much as I liked Ragnar, especially by the end, I do agree with Ashlad. I do feel as though Ragnar was a bit of a weight around Kanat's ankle, sort of not controlling him, but sort of, sheltering him from the storm, as it were. And to be a good leader, you kind of have to brave the storm on your own without any kind of shelter, without relying on others the way that Kanat relied on Ragnar and the way Ragnar sheltered him from the rest of the world. It was almost too much. It was overbearing, but it came from a place of love, and it was genuine. Ragnar genuinely cared about Kanat. To his dying breath, he cared so much about this kid and treated him like his own. And Kanat likely felt the same way, that Ragnar was more than just his helper. He was a friend to turn to. He was a father figure when his own dad was quite a tool. So for Kanat, losing Ragnar is huge. This is the equivalent to losing his dad, and it's probably going to bring him and Thorfinn a little closer. When I say closer, though, I don't mean I'm expecting them to be bestest buddies, but I do mean that I kind of foresee that they will eventually form a bit more of a bond than they currently have, which is a very standoffish, screw you, no screw you sort of bond, and I do sort of expect that to continue. But it'll be less of a angry type of relationship and more of a just oh, you're such a whiner, or oh, you're such a jerk, and yada yada. Sort of I can see them forming a Dean and Sam bond over time, but that's way down the line. I can imagine maybe a season or two from now, they have that sort of Sam Dean Winchester bond of one's a little bit more kinder while the other one's a little bit more hard, and they do razzle each other, but it comes from a place of I relate to you. I know what you've been through. We are brothers, quote unquote. I'm not saying that they're brothers. I'm just saying I can see them forming that kind of bond. I can also see them definitely not doing that, because Vinland Saga is very much people are complicated, and relationships between these people, especially in this era, are quite complicated. They're not quite what you think. So I can see me being totally wrong on that. but I think the fact that him losing Ragnar is akin to Thorfinn losing Thor's, it just sort of tells me that these two are on similar paths and that they may grow closer as a result of that. And I do think that Kenneth absolutely knows. And in fact, Askeladd and Bjorn even talk about that when they start discussing sort of what a leader is and like discussing the prince in general. And they point out that Kenneth's likely going to figure it out. And there's this one moment where Kenneth just looks at Askeladd when Askeladd says, like, hey, no, we don't have room for a corpse. And Kenneth just gives him this tilt of, like, he tilts his head a little bit and just glares at him, and he just says, like, you bastard. And I was like, yeah, he absolutely knows. He totally knows. And I think, again, it's going to be a situation where it's very similar to Thorfinn, where he just sticks around even though he knows that this dude definitely killed his father figure. I do think that he knows, and I think he's going to start playing the game a little bit. I'm excited to see how Kenneth grows going forward, because, again, I was very cold on this character at the beginning, but I kind of figured he'd start to grow, and I think we've seen that first step towards the Kenneth that we see in the OP, where he's looking kind of like a little bit more calm, a little bit more calculated, a little bit more cold. I think we're going to start seeing that version of the character, and you guys know me, I love me some angst, so I'm all about seeing Kenneth get more angsty and grow. But as for the man who did the killing, yes, we gotta talk a little bit about Askeladd and Bjorn too, because that opening scene with Askeladd and Bjorn talking about their opinion on the prince, how Bjorn's like, this kid is paralyzed with fear. How do you know that you didn't just make a bad play? How do you know that this gamble's gonna pay off? You don't, because for all you know, this kid could never come back from this. He could just be spineless for the rest of his days, and you bet on the wrong horse, and now we're all screwed. And Askeladd's like, nah. He basically is just like, no. If I'm wrong, then I'll just ditch the prince somewhere along the way. It's fine. But I want to shape him into somebody worth following. And he even says, like, Bjorn, why do you follow me? And Bjorn's like, well, because I want to. And he's like, exactly. like exactly. You follow me because you want to, and I want to follow this kid. I want to shape him into being somebody worth following. And I don't think that's the whole truth. In fact, we pretty much know that's definitely not the whole truth, but that's at least what Bjorn gets to hear. And so help me to Odin and every deity that there is, I swear, if anything happens to Bjorn next week, I am going to lose my collective mind. Every little piece of my brain that is left after many moons of watching anime, I will lose if anything happens to Bjorn, because that would blow my mind, because they've set Bjorn up as a character who, like, the fans very clearly care about. If you've been with the show, you know that Bjorn is just, he's the guy. He's the guy who's been there from the jump. He's a big cuddly teddy bear, even though he's a killing machine. That's how I view him anyway. You could tell that I have probably a different view on Bjorn than maybe a couple other people, but I know a lot of people love Bjorn. And if anything happens to Bjorn next week, I'm going to, not only will I lose it, I think a good majority of Vinland Saga anime onlys will also lose it, because he's been there for so long. He's such a, like, reasonable dude, and yet also a total badass. Like, if he goes, I'm gonna be upset, but I can sort of see it the way that this week's episode ended. I can definitely see it ending with Bjorn, like, making the sacrifice play, or Bjorn getting left behind while, like, the chariot runs off. Like, say, like, Askeladd gets in the chariot and they race off through the snow, and he gets left behind to fend off their former allies on top of Thorkel. And that would be a heck of a fight, if I'm told. Like, Bjorn with, like, the berserker mushroom versus Thorkel would be kind of cool. But Thorkel's also, like, an absolute tank, so it probably wouldn't last very long. Again, if anything happens, I will be very upset. I also wonder what's gonna happen to, like, Thorgrim and Atli and Eir. Like, are they gonna stick with Askeladd, or are they gonna ditch Askeladd and go with Thorkel? Although we know that Thorkel's not exactly taken any extra men to his side right now. He's pretty much just gunning to take down these guys, save the prince, and have a fight with Thorfinn again. Like, that's all this dude wants. So I'm very curious what's going to happen next week. I really don't know what way it's going to go. And I really don't know what game Askeladd's playing right now. I really don't. I don't see how this benefited him. This whole breaking the bridge thing, which was 1000% symbolic. Like, that was Ashlad just testing the waters, seeing who, I think that, like, what I assume is that was Ashlad testing the waters, seeing who's still faithful, seeing who's still loyal, and who's willing to break rank. That's what I assume that whole thing was for, just so he can keep an eye on everybody, see who's talking to who, and yada yada. And breaking the bridge, to me, is definitely symbolic of Ashlad saying, like, this is where I burn my bridges. Like, this is where you're either with me or you're against me, and if you're against me, I don't care, you're in my way. So get out of my way. Like, I think that's all that, like, that whole scene was obviously, like, for gameplaying in terms of the narrative, but in a meta sense, that was very metatextual of Ashlad being like, all right, this is where I burn my bridges. Who's ever with me is with me. Who's ever against me is against me, and that's it. And there's no in between. You're either with me or you're not. And I have to know where this is going, so I don't know about you guys, but I'm with Ashlad. I love Thorkel to pieces, but I gotta know what Asklad's playing at, so I'm gonna stick with my boy. Although that said, in the OP we do see a little scuffle with Thorfinn and Thorkel, so I wouldn't be against Thorfinn and the narrative leaving Ashlad and going with Thorkel. I don't know if that, I don't know, because I love Asklad, right? Like, and he's such a fascinating character, but I also love Thorkel for, like, different reasons. Thorkel's way more fun, whereas Ashlad's more fascinating. So I don't know if I would want the narrative to, like, jump ship to Thorkel, like, have Thorkel take Kanat and Thorfinn, and then, like chase after Ashlad with those two in his tow. Or something, I don't know. That's the thing with Vinland Saga. I truly, as an anime only, I really don't know where it's going, and I assume manga fans, like, who are way caught up and, like, much past this, also don't know where the story's going in terms of like where they're at in their story, because the story is just hard to pinpoint where it's gonna go, even though it's based off of, like, what, like, real life events. What the characters themselves do, I genuinely don't know. I don't know where it's going, but I'm so excited for next week, especially after they left it on a cliffhanger, because of course they did. With that said, everybody, I'm going to happily give this week's episode a solid rank of A. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and I cannot wait for next week. On that note, everybody, that just about wraps everything up, but before we go, as always, I want to give a big shout out to the good folks over on Patreon, namely those in the Earl Grey tier: Calvin Atkinson, Crowbar of Irony, Dominic, Urza, Ginkotaku, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Mirth Mouser, Omner Garamond, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Steven, Tristan, and Verdun. Thank you all so much for your continued support over on Patreon, and hey, if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then by all means go ahead and check out that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get for as little as $1 a month, and get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. But on that note, everybody, that's going to be a video, so I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, you've probably been on the internet long enough to know what to do already, so I ain't going to tell you, but I will say that it is appreciated. And if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.